Hello, both of you. It's nice to see you both, and thanks for coming to this call. So maybe we could start with who is DRR and what's your role within the universe of No Direct Flight Nairobi?
Wow. Okay, so DRR is a journal based in Nairobi. We are a print and online journal. And what we do is we work with writers, artists, designers, musicians, even etc. to sort of just create stories and build stories along different formats on print and online and soon on multimedia. So MDF is actually our first major partnership. And so what we're doing is we're the publishing partners and we'll be running a supplement alongside our third issue. And yeah, that's how we plug in. I don't know if Cliff has more.
I mean, it's always been so difficult to say what DRR is, and
yeah.
But basically, we're just writers, and we want to publish. We want to not just publish, but publish really good writing. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
I mean, those sound like lofty goals, hey? But I feel like you're up to it. So maybe talk to us a little bit about the role of writing in creating and archiving this Nairobi, Kenyan, African imaginary, and especially in relation to like some of the films we are seeing, all of the films we are seeing actually, like where does writing fit into this? Yeah.
It's, you know, the weird thing about writing has been between Frank and I and our curating of the first issue, the second issue. The weird thing has been like, how do you define writing in this world? Who are you even to say that you can define writing? And Nairobi defies being, you can't write Nairobi. So one of the things that I've been trying to tell Frank right about is he has a story about this person in Majengo. He won't write it. But anyway,
I feel like something is going on here.
No, but anyway, so interesting enough, both Frank and I live on Moi Drive, and it has changed so much in the past 5 years. I mean, you have stories about Wayaki Way and the trees being cut down. But even before Wayaki Way happened, it happened here. Like the entire town was flat out destroyed. But it's a strange thing to talk about Nairobi because I don't think a Nairobi exists. It stopped existing a long time ago. I don't know for Frank, but for me, there's no Nairobi to talk about. And especially now, because we're talking about being in Nairobi, especially in a time of COVID, and in a time of probably 2022, when the elections are going to happen, in a time when, you know, Biden is winning.
Yeah. Yeah.
But anyway, there is no Nairobi.
Now that there's no Nairobi, maybe we could talk about what sort of responses you anticipate from the writers who, I know that's one of the things you're doing as part of NDF, having a group of writers, 13 or more. How many?
Just about
13, yes. So you have a group of 13 writers responding to the films, responding to the shorts and so on, to the feature films and the short films. So what do you anticipate will come out of those responses?
Yeah. I think on to also what Cliff has said, in the sense that there is no Nairobi, like the construct Nairobi, the map of the fish that we've grown up with, that visual representation of Nairobi, it doesn't exist. And Nairobi exists differently for different people because it depends on your perception, your class, where you come from, and who is feeding you in Nairobi, more or less. And with that in mind, our call out to writers is sort of to respond to this from their Nairobis and from their perceptions of these films. And to this, I think also about what Nigeographia did last year with the exhibition with Onyis Martin. And there's this term that BM kept bringing up, the Nautomat, the Nairobi residents who moves through time and places and carries time and places with them and never has anything or any permanent grounding to any of these places. And then that's sort of the what we are thinking towards beyond criticism and beyond, this is a good film, this is a bad film, this is a film with black actors, this is a film with racist directors, etc. It's about what perceptions and what realities do this film give the different people living in the different Nairobis. And that's what we're interested to find out. And we're really curious to see what comes out, because none of us claims to know Nairobi or to claim to have like a finger on a particular Nairobi, despite the name of our journal.
Which maybe we should say for the audience is Downriverroad, and River Road is a not insignificant road in Nairobi. So I like what you're saying, how there are many different Nairobis, and in a sense there's also many different Africas, many different like Afro-diasporic experiences and so on. So what's the place of a journal like DRR in these conversations about, the African writing scene, the Afro-diasporic scene? Because that's what some of the ideas, some of the films tackle, this idea of being third culture, as we say these days, not really of this place, but not really of that place, and so on. So, and in the context of the film season, but also on a larger scale, what's your perception of this African Afro-diasporic conversation? Yeah.
Cliff?
It's really interesting because Frankie and I, we've been trying to think about the idea of the Afropolitan, of the Afro sense thing. Really, for DRR, most of the submissions we get are from Nigerians and Kenyans. So the question has been, how do you get people from Ivory Coast, people from Senegal, people from Mali, people from the Central African Republic? How do you get people from South Africa? I think 1% of the work we've worked with is from South Africa.
Northern Africa, Kwanzaa.
Yeah. I mean, we don't have anyone from Egypt, do we?
No.
So the thing is, I feel like at the moment there is no, the idea of Afropolitan. I mean, Binya wrote about it. What was her name?
Taye Selassie.
Taye Selassie wrote about the Afropolitan. But I feel like, so now, Now, I mean, because you asked, there's a really nice channel that just came out from Namibia. It's called the
Doek.
Windhoek.
Windhoek. Oh, good beer, nice beer.
But the thing is, no one knows, we don't know about it. And there's so much happening in places like SA, places in Zambia. There are no conversations happening amongst all of us. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And also to add on that, I think for us, it's the opportunity to broaden these conversations. And, you know, there's always this thing that people talk about in reading and writing and then maybe creative spaces, that you can't consume everything, you can't read everything, you don't know everything. But like there are people working within the same spaces that you're working with at any given time. You're not the only one who's working in that particular space. There are people who are tackling these challenges in their own ways. And often the struggle is to bring these spaces together and to bring these imaginations together to see what comes out of it and to build a bigger scale. Because also, like, you know, this work, this labor is really taxing on the people who make it. And for example, when I think about a film like Hello Rain, which is like a really interesting film and talks about like the intersection of technology and juju and feminism and stuff like that. And when you think about what technology has done to us in terms of social media, for example, and even what we're seeing in the US right now, and the surprises that we're seeing, is the fact that people sort of inhabit different worlds based on their perception, you know, and social media has made it such that these echo chambers exist in such a way that you don't know. Essentially, you have a whole new different news stream. Like a Trump supporter has a whole new different news stream than a Biden supporter, for example, you know. But like all these truths are out there and they exist, but then you still find that people have no idea what's happening like right next door. So, you know, partnerships like this with NDF and writing into these films and inquiry into these productions really give us the chance to go into other forms, other creations, and learn something, because like learning never stops. And for us, again, we start from the point of we don't know. So we start, we sort of try to find out what we know and what we don't know, and then how to know. And all these are questions that we answer like along the way, along with working with people, watching these films, talking to people, and writing what we think up and having people respond to that. Yeah. I think.
I love this idea of curiosity as it being like the driving force behind the work you're doing, because I feel like it's very easy to grow complacent and be like, we have the answers, you know what I'm saying? We have answered all the questions, and now people just need to, we have the marking sheet or whatever it was called. That's what it was called.
No. Hakuna marking scheme kwa hii stuff, manze. As in, nobody knows shit. I mean, even like that's time and again we are surprised by how much we don't know. And I think that's the fun bit about creating and building, is that like always being astonished and always being surprised. I mean, life would be so boring if you knew everything to a certainty.
And Nyambura, this idea about being complacent, I think for us, there have been times when it was really, really, really difficult. So, complacent, that's a huge, huge, huge word. How do you redefine everything, you know? So one of the things we've tried to do is have other people with us, like you are here with us.
Yeah.
But the idea has always been to remove, so there's Frankie, there's myself, but the idea has always been to remove ourselves from this thing and have other people come in and tell us, you know, what you're doing is shit.
Yeah.
Or not.
Yeah, I mean, we would really want that, because like criticism and art production go hand in hand. Because we can't be shouting into the void and thinking that we are the shit, because that's a fallacy, and that type of hubris, I think, is what leads to so much misunderstandings and yeah, I don't think it takes us anywhere in terms of fostering production and cultural reproduction. So
production.
Yeah.
He said what he said.
For us, we always seek to find out like what has also been produced in that, what has been written in what we are seeking out to do. Like just before this conversation, you're talking about the reading and what sources are we leaning to for this. So, for example, when you talk about a short like Hahe, by just a band, it's impossible to go into that without reading just a book and what someone like Mukami Kuria wrote about just a band, and how essentially they sort of flipped the narrative in video production, and by going viral through using like the nostalgic appeal of Makmende, which was a figure that was recognizable in all of like in most of 90s kids who, like, by the time Makmende was coming out, were like in their late 20s, early mid 20s, something like that. This is a figure that was very instrumental in our growing up. We used to call ourselves Makmende when we were fighting out there, when we were playing football. If you score a goal, you call yourself Makmende. So by just a band bringing it back and having us think about that and the nostalgic appeals around that, and even the violence in the film and what's happening in there, really made you think, because it also came out at a time when we were supposed to be comfortable, you know, the knack years, etc, and stuff is supposed to be chill, and we are supposed to you know, be content as a society. But you are like, no, we need a Makmende. So like, where's our Makmende gonna come from? So like, those are questions that still persist to date. We are like, where's our Makmende gonna come from in 2022, for example? Because right now, here we are being given like this handshake that nobody voted for, and this false sense of security and peace. But I mean, we know there's like this something heavy in the air. There's this heavy undercurrent of discontent and even anxiety, like I might say. So like, well, like, do we need a Makmende now? Where is a Makmende gonna come from? What form is a Makmende gonna take? You know, so like, it's constantly going back to these productions and finding out what they did at the time, why they did what they did, and can they be relied upon now to sort of do the same thing again?
True, like,
I really like what Frank said about discontent, because I think DRR is defined by discontent.
Wow.
Mostly because we're broke.
I mean, facts.
Carry on.
I'm interested in the audiences you imagine are going to come to NDF or to DRR off of this collaboration, because I'm always curious about this sort of thing. Like, you have an audience. That's for sure. You know, every time you release an issue, it's a big deal, and continues to be a big deal because it's, you know, a collection of really interesting writers and makers. I don't even want to just say writers, because your latest issue also has like a sonic element, which was really cool. Photography, art, you know, I mean, all of these things poetry poetry. You know, all of these things come together. And I know Clifton is, you know, an award-winning poet. So he's the poetry half of this conversation. And so I'm curious about which audiences you imagine, because I mean, you have a fresh take on things, on art making, but also even just this insight you just gave on Hahe, which for me has like an extra layer of nostalgia. It's like, I remember when that video came out, but I remember also the things it was referencing. It's like layers of nostalgia. It's like a nostalgia layer cake. You know what I'm saying? And so I'm interested in which audiences you imagine are going to come to this off of the writing you're going to do about the films, but also your collaboration during the course of the film season. Yeah. Who would you like to welcome, and who do you think is also going to be welcomed to DRR off of NDF, you know, because I imagine it's a symbiotic thing. Yeah.
For me, I think the first ask would be like curious people, just people who are curious. And this, I think, supersedes demographics in the sense of like 18 to 35-year-old male or female, low income earning, etc., because curiosity has no age demographic. So I'm like people who just are like, let me say, exhausted or sort of numbed by like Hollywood or productions from Hollywood, and the linear storytelling and like storylines in Hollywood films, and that have been also mimicked by our own productions that are now heading to Netflix and stuff, because we are like you see some of those films and you are like, is this how someone from Langata speaks, for example, you know, something like that. So like we
the tables, they're shaking.
The table. So like when you talk about audiences, we know that there are people who are like, no, this is not it. I'm thinking about when Nairobi Half-Life came out, for example, you know, and all the you know, all the excitement around Nairobi Half-Life, and also maybe Veve. So these are films that sort of, we know these stories. We know slum life, we know the mirror trade, but you know, having it there in full color, in, you know, having all these shots, it was really an eye opener, I think, for us at the time, because we were seeing these pictures in a way that we weren't used to, and then also they were receiving international acclaim in a way that we had not been accustomed to, for example, because before then the trope is, you know, the out of Africa type of nonsense that was coming out. But you know, when we did or when Akina Billy and Akina Matadia did Nairobi Half-Life, that was really, you know, eye-opening at the time, I think. I don't know if Cliff has something to add to that in terms of audiences.
I mean, I think for me, I really liked Half-Life. And in a way, because of the language. And for me, one of the biggest issues about me and writing and me and film and me and being Kenyan is, how do you write language? So this is something I was thinking about yesterday. When one of the guys goes to River Road for a girl, and then the girl says, "Uko na kuma ndogo kama ya nyoka." And I love that line. Like, I love Sheng, I love Swahili, but there's such a huge disconnect between what film is and what film is supposed to be. we don't speak Shen, for instance. Yeah.
Yeah, so with that, I think it all comes back to representation, and you've asked about to come back now to the direct question about which audiences do you expect to come to this. I think it's people who see themselves in these films. You know, when you talk about a film like If Objects Could Speak, where we are going into museums and digging up the ghosts of the artifacts that are held in the British museums and in Paris and stuff. So we're like, what narratives are sort of entombed in these artifacts, and who should own them? You know, John Berger talks about seeing and the scene and the power dynamics between the one who's looking and the one who's being looked at. So with these films, largely they are attempts by creators who are shifting the lens and shifting the gaze, and we expect audiences who see themselves in these films or who want different stories than the ones they're accustomed to seeing, and now have a chance to maybe reverse the gaze. Yeah, I think.
Maybe I should say this is a total aside, but John Berger's Ways of Seeing is a book I return to often because it does so much work. I mean, it's technically about visual art, but it's really about art and art production and who gets to see and who has to be seen and how they're seen and so on.
Yeah, and who has the power? Yeah.
That part.
It's all about power. I mean, if you look at, for example, something like Avengers. Okay, take Avengers for example. Wakanda is in. You know, brilliant film, good production. etc. You have writers like Ta-Nehisi Coates in there, Kina Lupita in there, and stuff like that. But then you're like, okay, so this is Marvel's best film in a bit, and drawing a lot of viewership from the colored community or whatever demographics they peg us under. But then at the bottom line, it just serves capital, and it still serves to obscure the people who are harmed by capital and the people who are marginalized by capital. Because you're like, how much of that $2+ billion that Avengers grossed came down to sort of the people who are marginalized by capital, you know, for example. And I know people just say it's business and stuff, and then it's good representation and Wakanda forever, but you're like, is it? You know, is it?
So I'm curious about, and Cliff touched on this briefly, this idea of like writing and film and where they come together. You know, what's the place of literature, text making, so to speak, in film, you know, and filmmaking. I know, because I mean, I know there are lots of writers who work in the world of film, you know, as screenwriters. Some of them work in visual things, like the number of writers in this city who are working in advertising, for instance, is not insignificant, you know.
Writers,
I personally, for a really long time, worked as a scriptwriter. For things I can really not say out in public. But I worked on a couple of series, and it was good money. It was really good money. And I've been talking to someone about writing as like being a poet and being a writer and writing films. Here, it doesn't really matter if you're good or not. It just matters that you're hungry enough. So that's what happened to me. I worked on some Maisha Magic films. There's something called Sumula Penzi, or How to Find a Husband. Like I said, it was mostly about good money.
Money is good.
Yeah, frankly, what do you have to say about this?
Money is good. Yeah, I think to like talk about the literary hustle and stuff, and yeah, we work within that. I think it's maybe I'd go back to Fred Morton in the Undercommons talking about working within the systems while destroying the systems, and working with people who are also working within the systems and destroying the systems. So your aspect here, kujenga na kubomoa. And even you could argue that's what's happening in the US right now. You are like, yeah, we realize that we are maybe kicking this guy out of the White House, but like we have also exposed the rot in our social fabric, and the hate and the bigotry in it. So unajua kujenga na kubomoa and stuff like that. So we are like, we want the empire to fall. Make no mistake about that. We all want the empire to fall and stuff like that. But no buts. Let the empire fall.
No ifs, no buts.
No buts. Let the empire fall.
So, what opportunities exist for writers, writers interested in film, writers generally, and where can they find those opportunities? Because I think that's Clifton has spoken about working on, a fairly lucrative opportunity in the world of, the visual arts, etc. But if you're a person who's interested in writing, or in writing for a visual medium, or in sonic work or whatever, where do you start? I mean, we could start with the submissions page, but yeah, where does one start?
It's strange because, especially now with COVID, everyone is saying there are no funds for the arts, right? But writing about film, do you mean as for instance, as a reviewer or as a scholarly article?
Not even writing about film, but writing also for film, where does one start? Does one start with, say, writing a short story, which is maybe optioned into a film? What's the point of entry? Because I think that's always a question for people on the outside looking in. If I'm a 16-year-old who's watching these films and I'm like, I really like these shots, I like the idea of them, and I'm a fairly good writer, I score a lot of points in compositions. For instance, where does one start?
I think it goes back to the story that you want to tell that you feel hasn't been told. And I think it's Toni Morrison said she wrote The Bluest Eye because she wanted to write something that she had not been seen written, a story that she hadn't been seen written and stuff like that. So when we I listened to someone the other day saying that a photograph is a truth in one frame, and therefore film is a truth in like 24 frames or something like that. So when you think of that backwards in terms of telling your own truth, then you realize that you're not quite writing to submit somewhere. I mean, that isn't your primary goal. You're not writing this production to sort of write to something. There's just this story in your head, and there are these pictures in your head, and there are these truths in your head that you seek to bring to life, and film is just one medium that will do that. You can of course put it in text, but at the back of your mind you have these pictures, you have these visual aspects of the story that you're telling, and so when you start from that construct, you really don't have like a submission call out in mind. You're just sort of heading out into the uncharted territory. You're building the map as you explore the territory. And yeah, so I think with that, just start with questions and questions, and with that you start asking, you know, what have other people made around that subject, what films have been made, and it can be really astonishing to see how much of what you think hasn't been made has already been made, because the way, again, going back to tech and the algorithms, the way social media is presented, which is where most of us and a lot of us get the links, get the reading materials, get the references. A lot of it is super skewed to what is marketable, what is visible. So when you go into like the alternate and the things that you don't know about, you find that a lot of the stories that you think haven't been told have been told. So your job as the as a creator is to, because you're also creating knowledge, is to see what knowledge has already been created and add on to it, or subtract it even. You know, I mean, if some knowledge has been put out that is false, then, you know, as a truth teller, then it's also your duty to maybe speak a truth that will set the record straight or something. I don't know.
That's an interesting take, because you know the way when you cook and you put too much salt, you're told you can put a potato in and then it'll take up some of that salt. And
Yeah.
I think it's so easy. Generally, like the way we think about creating is an additive process, but it's curious to think of the creative process as also, like, in a sense, a subtractive process, like taking some things out of the world, you know, being the potato to the salt in the soup. Yeah.
Ask anybody who's stuck on their PhD thesis, they'll tell you that.
So you have 2 issues out in the world, Ritual and Place, if I'm not wrong. And
We had a bigger issue as well.
Pardon?
We had a beta, so you can say 3, tentatively 3 or 2.5.
Okay, 2.5 issues. Why is that half, friends? But anyway, you have 2.5 issues out in the world, and you said that your the NDF pieces will be a supplement to the 3rd issue. So when should we expect it, and what should we expect of it?
Ooh. Hey, Cliff. Idea.
So one of the things we're thinking about is, for instance, the size of it. These are aesthetic issues.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, Frankie and I have been thinking about what do we write about in the last months of 2020.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things we thought about was World's AIDS Day.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, we've been thinking about the pandemic. So we have a lot of work from all our writers. So the idea has been to just bring all that together and kind of curate it for it to make sense.
Mm-hmm.
But in addition to that, now we have the NDF thing, the pullout. So we're doing film as well.
Nice.
Yeah, so, we don't know how it will look. Kwanza, because for our writers, we essentially, DRR, we give a carte blanche to like people to write whatever, like experiment with forms, experiment with tone, experiment with plot lines, experiment with everything and stuff, and break rules, also break rules, and yeah. So sometimes it's even scary, by the way, because you get something in your inbox and you're like, what the fuck, unajua? So we and we want more of that. We want more of that because people need to sort of it's good when people are shaken out of what grounds them, and when you are uncertain, because uncertainty, I think, complacency. Going back to complacency is sort of, it's boring, it's unimaginative, it's comfortable, and we at DRR, we are all about experimenting, and for our writers, we encourage experimenting, and we are curious, and we are really excited to get work that will really challenge conventions and sort of shake foundations and make us more uncertain about what we know. Yeah, because we don't want to be certain about what we know.
So during this film season, where do people go to challenge their, ideas and their notions of the world? Tell us about your website, your social media, all of that stuff, so that people know where to find you.
Oh, so
and what to do when they find you? Do they just follow, or do they follow but also send a provocation your way or something like that?
Yeah. I mean, follow us, send us stuff. We are open for submissions all through the year, and we are on downriverroad.org, and Downriverroad online on Twitter, on Facebook, on Insta, still Downriverroad KE. And yeah, that's our little corner of the internet where we play around with shit.
Well, and
welcome. Karibu sana, everybody.
Asante. This was so much fun. It's always great talking to you. And I mean, I'm shaking my fist at the pandemic, because it would be so great to gather and, see each other and talk to each other. And this is the next best thing. And I really enjoyed this conversation. I always feel, like I've been taking notes the whole time we've been talking, because you always bring something fresh to the conversation. So thank you both so much. Thank you for making time. This was fantastic. And then now we're going to do a small thing where we look at each other for 5 seconds, so that the film doesn't cut off just like that. I love the way people were drinking and smoking and, vibes, pure vibes. We love to see it. Yes.
Life is so hard sober, manze. I mean, I don't know how sober people are going through the pandemic, but up them.